welcome to episode number 067 of Something Else with Arya and Not KJ. My name is Arya, joined as always by Not KJ. If you're listening to this in America, happy Thanksgiving. Based on the last time I checked our recording, our air schedule, our air date, Thanksgiving is going to be tomorrow, as you are listening to this right now. And if my plans continue how they are currently scheduled to be, I'm either going to be in Pennsylvania visiting my brother or on my way to visit my brother in Pennsylvania. So, that's where we all are now on this beautiful Wednesday. Now, of course, as I'm saying this and introing the show, we're going to find out that, I'll get an email from Stevie later on this week, so I'm taping this a week in advance, where he'll say, hey, let's skip a week and just come back, the first week of December, and you'll all think I'm batshit crazy, which there's a good chance that you all already do. So this week's episode of Mid-South Wrestling, or this week's episode of Something Else, not just talks about Mid-South Wrestling from December 9th, 1982, but I figure you might want me to explain why I've titled the show, I Am Not Sean Ross Sapp. So, and this really tells you, how that it took me this long to find an episode without a title that I could come up with that I had to wait. But I have some friends who live on the Cape, who I met, my friend Alana through AEW Heels. And, through her, of course, I met her significant other, Tim. Now, I was down at their house a few months ago to watch the AEW, oh my God, what the fuck's that show called? Grand Slam. I was down there watching the Grand Slam show with them, and Tim starts talking about how Sean Ross Sapp is the only wrestling reporter he trusts. And now, I'm very aware of how nothing I mean to the wrestling reporting community. I'm very aware of this. I'm aware that I was unknown and unloved as F4W's NXT reporter for like 8 years. And I was an unknown, unloved reporter when I did AEW Dark for like the first 6 months of its existence. In fact, the only time anyone ever seemed to notice I existed was when people had an issue with what I wrote. Case in point, I did the Full Gear 2019 recap where I talked about how much I hated the Jon Moxley Kenny Omega Lights Out match. It's just not my cup of tea. Anywho, I get that, very tongue-in-cheek. I am a nobody in the grand scheme of wrestling reporters. However, Tim says this right in front of me and says the only wrestling reporter he trusts is Sean Ross Sapp. And I'm like, dude, I'm sitting right here. And it just became a running joke that I am, in fact, not Sean Ross Sapp. Most notably because if Sean Ross Sapp has a podcast, and I don't know if he does or doesn't, if he does, go listen to it. But his podcast probably gets more listens to than mine. And people who are currently looking at the view counts, both on angrymarks.com and YouTube, where I've recently started putting up these shows, will note the difference in the view counts between our respective programs. So anywho, I'm not Sean Ross Sapp. I am Arya, and this is Mid-South Wrestling, December 9th, 1982, from the Irish O'Neill Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. This is going to be one of those shows where I am going to need to stretch to fill some time here, because it's not that, the show's not fine. It's like there's not a lot of audio to play. I think, let me go through here. I have, honestly, I got 3 clips I would have normally played, and then just to add some time, I have a 4th clip later on. But let's start things off. We have an extended clip where we're going to break it in 2. We're going to start with the intro with Boyd Pierce and this week's guest host, Paul Bosch.
Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and we have a lot of exciting action coming up for you. Tag team action sends popular stars Mr. Olympia and Chavo Guerrero as partners. Also, Mr. Wrestling 2, the new Mississippi heavyweight champion, having won that title on November the 27th in the Jackson Coliseum in Jackson, Mississippi. Stagger Lee, the new North American heavyweight title holder. He gained the crown at the Superdome on Thursday night, November the 25th. Also, Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne, the Mid-South Tag Team Champions, are here. Mr. USA, Tony Atlas from Roanoke, Virginia. Gorgeous Gino Hernandez. A lot of great action because they're all top stars. And talking about top stars, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you about a man that's a successful promoter in Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in the United States, in the arena. And outside of the arena, he's great and known everywhere for his charitable activities to such groups as the Boys Clubs, the Rotary Clubs, and all the others. Besides that, he's the dean of professional wrestling announcer, 34 consecutive years, never missing a week on television. That means only one man. That's Mr. Paul Bosch. Paul, our guest commentator, welcome.
Thank you, Boyd. And I do have some trouble. I can't get this earphone over my cauliflowered ear. I don't have that trouble because I don't wear them in my program. Maybe that's why I stayed on for 34 years. But we are going to have action tonight, and certainly in Mid-South, action is busting out all over the place. Recently affiliated with Mid-South, Houston is well pleased with all of the things that come from the Mid-South area, and we think you people are pretty lucky. And our association is going to be a fruitful one for the fans, particularly because some of the wrestling talent here cannot be equaled any place else in the world, and that was the reason for our affiliation at the time.
And as our guest commentator, we're looking forward to your articulate commentary coming up. But earlier, Paul Bosch had an interview with Hacksaw Jim Duggan referring to the Brass Knucks Championship. Let's watch that right now.
Let's not. Let's wait, 3 minutes until I'm done talking about the first 2 minutes of the show. Now, quick question. Who was the Mississippi champion before Mr. Wrestling 2 won it? Now, by the way, the answer is Mr. Olympia. But the reason why I mentioned that is because even though he was introduced as Mississippi State champion, and we actually listened to the audio of the intro of last week's tag team match, was introduced as champion, Mr. Olympia has fallen off the world since the Loser Leaves Town tag team match back, 6 weeks ago at the end of October. He's been Mississippi champion. He's actually been on TV most, if not every week, but he's really done nothing. And so when they announced that Mr. Wrestling 2 was the new Mississippi State champion, I seriously had forgotten who the hell the former champion was. And I had to actually not so much look it up, but I had to, give it a few seconds thought before I remembered it was Olympia. Olympia's really gotten the shaft since this whole Stagger Lee thing started. He's been thrown out with the dishwater, so to speak. It's almost like he's the one that lost the match, even though, like I said, he's been here every week. Now, Mr. Wrestling 2 is our new Mississippi State champion. I should point out, we've talked about, last week, for instance, they didn't want to mention that Ted DiBiase is no longer the North American champion because the show was taped beforehand, so you don't want to tip your hand, and you don't want to insult, the TV viewing audience. However, what does that say about, the fans in Jackson, Mississippi, who this is now 2 weeks after they saw Mr. Wrestling 2 win the title, and last week, when it was only 1 week after, they saw on TV that Olympia was introduced as champion. Sorry, I have something there in my throat. That that's was the cause of that. So Paul Bosch gets a bigger introduction than Bill Watts ever does, and Bill Watts, again, is the owner and promoter of the company. But Paul Bosch gets the giant Legends intro. He's the dean of wrestling commentary, having announced for 34 years. Again, we'll talk about it during this week's show, but I am not a fan of Paul Bosch. Maybe he was a great commentator in Houston and he was better when it was his promotion. I don't know. If I'm going to listen to somebody talk for an hour without, saying much of anything, I want to listen to Bill Watts. Now, Bosch believes that the union between Houston and Mid-South Wrestling will be highly beneficial. And I believe it's not even just the union. I believe Watts has bought out Houston. It's one of those things that, again, one of those 8 million things I probably should look up before doing the show. But, hey, like I said, we have a little bit of time to kill this week. So let's see what I can find here on Google. Let's go to the always reliable Wikipedia and see what they say. Wash area, yada, 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 yada. No, it looks like it was never actually sold to Mid-South. Looks like it was just, a loose affiliation with Mid-South. All right, so they didn't get bought out. Okay. People, stop yelling at me, So, there we go. So let's now go to that interview with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who is the Louisiana State Champion, in case you've forgotten. And they're going to be talking about the Brass Knucks Championship.
Here at ringside with Hacksaw Duggan. Now that's Duggan with 2 G's and 1 belt.
Yes, sir, that's right. And Paul, I'm glad you're out here today because I understand that you're an inventor of something that I would very much like to have. Though I do have this nice, shiny Louisiana State Wrestling Championship belt, I actually feel kind of bare. I feel like I need something over the shoulder, something that really amplifies Hacksaw Duggan and Hacksaw Duggan's wrestling style. And I understand that you're the man who first brought out the Brass Knuckles Championship. And as long as I've been here in Louisiana, I buy these nice fancy damn programs, I open it up, and there's Cowboy Bill Watts as the Brass Knuckles champion.
Well, Cowboy Bill Watts won the Brass Knucks Championship, and he held it until he retired from the ring.
I understand that. I understand that he defended it very well. He was a rough and tough guy, my type of guy that I like. That's why I want the belt reinstated. That's why Hacksaw Duggan wants a shot at that belt. Bring that belt out of retirement. Bring Cowboy Bill Watts out of retirement. Bring somebody out of retirement. Bring Hacksaw Duggan that Brass Knuckles belt that he much deservedly belongs to him more than anyone else here in Mid-South. Now, excuse me, now I got to talk about this Tony Atlas who's going to take me out in the ring and a championship.
And that's about all the time you have right now to
see
talk. Well, I may have given Hacksaw Duggan a short answer, but the truth of the matter is that the Brass Knucks title was invented to signify the toughest wrestler in the world. He could qualify.
Right now, Paul, Hacksaw Duggan is in the ring. Let's go for the introduction of the opening match.
Okay. So, what the fuck was with the ending of that interview there? Honestly, not even the ending of the interview. What the fuck was wrong with a little bit of basically the last 30 seconds, I guess we'll say. So he wants to be Brass Knuckles champion. And, you might be sitting here along with me at the time wondering, what the hell is a Brass Knuckles championship? And why would you even have a championship belt? Why wouldn't the Brass Knuckles champion just get a pair of brass knuckles? Anywho, so he talks about how, Bosch invented the Brass Knuckles Championship and how when he buys the Mid-South programs every week, and I think it's wacky that they make Jim Duggan buy the program every week, hey, give him a free fucking copy, dude. He's in the goddamn thing. Give him a free copy. Anyway, that they show a big-ass picture of Bill Watts as the Brass Knuckles champion. He retired as champion. He retired the belt with him. And Duggan talks about he likes rough and tumble wrestling. He wants to bring the title out of retirement. He's like, hell, bring Watts out of retirement. And it's like, he's the kind of guy who likes to wrestle. See, Bill Watts doesn't have to be on the show, and we have to put him over. Like, we put him over last week with donating money. This week, we're putting him over as a tough, rough and tumble guy here. And then the weirdness starts. First, he starts trying to do a promo to build up his match next. We finds out it's going to be next week, where he defends the Louisiana title against Tony Atlas. And Paul Bosch cuts him off mid-sentence. They're like, "You're out of time. We're going to back to Boyd Pierce." And like, what the fuck, dude? Like, this shit isn't live. If the issue was Duggan needed to only spend 1 minute, or it was about a 2 minute promo, if he's only there to talk 1 minute about the Brass Knucks Championship and 1 minute about the match next week with Tony Atlas, press stop on the fucking camera and have him redo it. Because it was taped before the people were even in the crowd, because you can see all the empty seats behind Duggan. So if that's not bad enough, was the explanation as to what the Brass Knucks title is. They say the Brass Knucks champion, the Brass Knucks title determines the toughest wrestler in the world. Why wouldn't the world champion be the toughest wrestler in the world? Shouldn't the North American champion be the toughest wrestler in Mid-South? So why would you need a championship to determine the toughest wrestler in the world? It's like, it's basically saying, hey, all this other shit is fake. We're have this championship to determine that, hey, if this was real, this guy would be the one that wins all the time, without actually saying that. And if that's not what they're saying, what are they actually saying? Because I think it's, a little preposterous that like the whole point of the title is, this is the toughest man in wrestling. This is the toughest wrestler in the world. Why? That should not be the case. We already have championships to determine the toughest wrestler in the world. And if, in this case, Stagger Lee isn't the toughest wrestler in the world, or is Flair the NWA champion at this point? Flair's the NWA champion. If Flair's not the toughest wrestler in the world, then he shouldn't be champion. Somebody else should be champion. But because they're champions, they're the toughest wrestler in the world. Junkyard Dog's the toughest wrestler in Mid-South. Or, I'm sorry, Stagger Lee is the toughest wrestler in Mid-South. I'm sorry, the explanation of it is bullshit. I don't know what a good explanation would be. Maybe treat it how New Japan for a while treated the never open weight title, when it was Makabe and Minoru Suzuki and who the fuck is that other guy? Oh my god, I can't fucking remember. Oh, Goto. When it was those three beating the shit out of each other, that was essentially the never open weight title. It was the strong style title, without actually saying it's the strong style title. But now you're not even saying that. Now you're trying to explain it while coming up with a bullshit explanation. Sorry, that's a bullshit explanation. I'd like to point out, for a show that I said wasn't going to have a lot to talk about, we're like 18 or 19 minutes in, and we're only 4 minutes and 40 seconds into this week's episode of Mid-South Wrestling. So with that, we move on to the Louisiana State Champion, Jim Duggan, with our first match against Lester Parks. Boyd introduced Lester Parks as being from Jamaica. Reeser introduces him as being from someplace called Jamaica. Bosch says Duggan is offended by being in the opener of this week's show. He'd much rather be in the main event. I'm with you, Jim. I understand you completely. Duggan used what was referred to as a crotch hold and lift, which you and I know was a body slam, before using the 3-point stance and the spear for the win. So it looks like he's finally accepted that, his most over move should be his finish. None of this weird backbreaker into the corner, stuff. Lester Parks does not have a cage match profile, so not sure how long he lasts. Although, even when you think about like the level of wrestlers that have cage match profiles, to not have one, you're pretty low on the totem pole of wrestling here. There was actually a WWE developmental wrestler in 2011 named Leroy Parks. This is not him. Mississippi champion Mr. Wrestling 2 versus Mike Bond. 2 is so happy and proud to be Mississippi State champion, he doesn't even wear his championship cummerbund to the ring. Bosch says 2's style is an exasperation to most of the people he beats. I would assume if you're a constant winner, your style would be an exasperation to your opponents who are unable to figure it out to beat you. Bosch does remind us of the issues that 2 is having with someone defacing his masks. As we saw last week, someone stole one and painted a yellow streak down the front of it. I'm not entirely sure Bosch takes a breath, as he says approximately 2,317 consecutive words during this match without a pause. Reeser must have recognized this, as he cuts Bosch off long enough to talk about how 2 beat Olympia and Jackson, Mississippi for the title. Paul Bosch's nonstop commentary was the most entertaining thing about this match, because if this match went 5 minutes, it was 4 minutes of Mr. Wrestling 2's headlock. He just really, really loved that headlock. Legit, at one point, Bond gets up and uses a brain buster that 2 no-sells and puts on another headlock. Eventually, 2 gets tired of the headlocks and wins with the knee lift. So I guess there's somebody out there going, hey, use the 4-minute headlock because it weakens your head, weakens your face. So when he does the running knee lift, bam, right in the kisser, it knocks him the fuck out because it's been warmed up. Personally, I would say that, I could get kneed in the kisser and bam, knock me the fuck out, even with the 4-minute headlock softening up my head. All right, so I mentioned we only have 4 bits of audio this week, and we've already played 2, and we're 12 minutes into the show. It's time for the 3rd bit of audio. Let's go to Paul Bosch interviewing Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne about DiBiase losing the North American title to Stagger Lee.
Stagger Lee, the new North American heavyweight champion, will be in action in our next match. But earlier, our guest commentator, Paul Bosch, talked with Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne, and the center of controversy of that interview was Stagger Lee, Paul, right?
Is it Stagger Lee or JYD? Ted DiBiase has his own ideas.
All right, let's watch and listen to what they had to say.
With me at ringside and devoid of belts, Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne. And Ted, you have something to say about that.
The reason I'm here, Mr. Bosch, is because I want to talk about the North American heavyweight title, of which I was not beaten, I was robbed of. I was assured that if I took the mask off of Stagger Lee, and it was in fact the Junkyard Dog, that he would be suspended not for 90 days, but no less than 1 year. I did this. I took the mask off of him. It was in fact the Junkyard Dog. There was press at ringside taking pictures. All of a sudden, I can't find a photographer. I can't find one picture of the Junkyard Dog. Matchmaker Grizzly Smith says, I didn't happen to see that match. Now, have you ever known Grizzly Smith to miss a major title match? No. And Boyd Pierce, the voice of Mid-South Wrestling, was at ringside, got up and turned his back and said he didn't see it. And he was right there.
My word doesn't seem to be any good, though.
Now, the reason I'm bringing this to your attention, Mr. Bosch, is because I know that you are a fair man. You dealt with my father in the past, and I want a rematch. I want the chance to prove this again, and I know if I can get him in the ring, I can prove it again, that it is, in fact, the Junkyard Dog. If I can get this match in Houston, Texas, I know that you would be unbiased and would deal with it fairly, and justice would be served.
Well, it just depends. We'll see what we can do about it.
Paul Bosch, as you'll learn, you've known me through the years, the people in the Mid-South area watching know that I tell it just like it is. I was in the Superdome on Thanksgiving evening. I was at ringside during that championship match, as Ted DiBiase said, between he and Stagger Lee. But I did not see who Stagger Lee was, because when the unmasking started, I turned my back talking to the policeman, because I don't have the time to be a star witness before Mr. Charlie Lay, the president of the Mid-South Wrestling. And when I turned around to the ring, the count was 1, 2, 3, and the winner was Stagger Lee, who is a new North American heavyweight champion. Right now, let's go to the ring for the introduction of the next match.
So it's a conspiracy against Ted DiBiase by basically the entire Mid-South wrestling. And you could say he's had this coming because he screwed over, baby faces on a number of occasions. And actually, it was mostly Junkyard Dog he kept screwing over. But at the end of the day here, DiBiase was told all he had to do was unmask Stagger Lee and prove that it's a Junkyard Dog. And if he does, then he's gone for a year instead of 90 days. And he did, apparently. He apparently had the mask removed. And when that happened, suddenly there's no photographers at ringside. There's no camera people at ringside. Boyd Pierce, a Mid-South official, when it began being unmasked, you heard him. He decided to stand up and turn around and start speaking to a policeman so he didn't have to be a witness to an investigation by Charlie Lay. Like, Jesus Christ. Like this, and I'll tell you what, and we got, our smart ass fans, nowadays. There had to be a smart ass fan somewhere in New Orleans. There were like, there's 20 some odd thousand people at the Superdome. You tell me there isn't one smart ass fan to sit here and be like, hey, I'll go and testify on your behalf, Ted DiBiase. I was there. I saw that. And but yeah, DiBiase is being fucked over. We are fucking over the heels, and I guess, he's got what he deserves. He fucked over Junkyard Dog over and over again. And now that, he's telling the truth, he has proven that Stagger Lee is the Junkyard Dog. But Mid-South is conspiring to not, not care, basically. And I mean, that is one of those things, I want to say it is what it is, because Mid-South is just going to blissfully ignore that. All right. Stagger Lee, our new North American champion, against Marty Lundy. Now, there might be somebody going, wait a second. Didn't this match happen last week? It did. My best guess is they're having a best of 3 series. Stagger Lee is up 1-0. And so Marty Lundy is going to try to tie the best of 3 series at 1 here. Now, we'll see if, maybe being a champion, maybe now that Stagger Lee is a champion, Marty Lundy is going to be more inspired. He's going to come out here. He's going to kick some ass, take some names, and tie our series up at 1. Spoiler, he doesn't. Lee won with a headbutt. Stagger Lee, by the way, let's put it, we're not even like plausible deniability. Like, we are so far out the window of plausible deniability, it's not even funny. Stagger Lee wears his championship belt backwards like Junkyard Dog does. Stagger Lee uses the thump like Junkyard Dog does. Stagger Lee wins with a falling headbutt like Junkyard Dog does. It's like we are outside of plausible deniability at this point. And at this point, like, Ted DiBiase could run out there, pull off Stagger Lee's mask, and point the cameras at it, and the cameras would break. That's what goes on here in Mid-South Wrestling with, poor Ted DiBiase in his quest to unmask Stagger Lee. Tag team champions Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne versus, of all teams, Buddy Landel and Tim Horner. This is December 1982. Over on the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along project, it's August 1992, and Horner and Landel are beating each other for months in strap matches and then I Quit matches. And actually, this week on Smoky Mountain, It is the penultimate episode of Buddy Landel on his first run, or his penultimate match. Like I said, he may have a promo or something, but Buddy is on his way out for the time being. So check out the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along project every week right here on AndyMarks.com. So Bosch keeps calling Bourne Tony Bourne. He keeps confusing Matt with his dad Tony. As Landel and Horner shined on him. DiBiase did fare better, but fucked up a sunset flip. They did cover it up with Landel jumping on top for a near fall, but it just looked clunky. DiBiase and Bourne made Horner and Landel look like $1 million each, as both underneath baby faces ran wild on the heels. Bourne used, and I quote, one of the nastiest ways to flatten someone's nose, aka a knee to Buddy Landel. And by the way, I should mention this: there's going to be 2 tag team matches on this show here, and instead of tag, Paul Bosch keeps saying touch, and it just sounds so wrong to hear someone, anyone, say Horner is trying to touch Landel, but that's what we hear throughout this match. The referee got distracted, and just like last week, Bourne came off the top rope with the move that would one day be referred to as the whoopee cushion for the win, and Boyd flipped the fuck out at this. And actually, after he hit the whoopee cushion, DiBiase slept on the figure 4 for the submission. Hopefully, you're having no issue hearing me, because I'm having an issue with my headset right now, and usually I can hear my voice echo into the headset, and right now I'm having an issue. So hopefully this is not a show I have to retape the end to later on, but wouldn't that be fun? Tony Atlas versus Tug Taylor. It is the return of Tug Taylor. I guess they wanted the largest jobber they had and decided they didn't want to bring back Hacksaw Higgins. Despite what I may or may not have said in a previous episode, Tug Taylor is not the future Tugboat / Fred Ottman / the Shockmaster. It is somebody completely different. However, they do share a body type and a size, and that is the gist of our last little bit of audio here. Thanks to our lack of audio, we're going to play Paul Bosch describing the body types of Tony Atlas and Tug Taylor.
A contrast in shape in more ways than one, because Tug Taylor is a throwback to the old wrestlers of the 1920s whose barrel girth was the big part of their strength. And in Tony Atlas, one of the most magnificent athletes you're going to see in many a day's walk is here to demonstrate the fact that the modern athlete believes in muscle as beauty as well as muscle that is functional, and any man that can prone press 550 or 600 pounds is a man who is going to be reckoned with a lot of sincerity. In all the 50 years I've put in wrestling, I think Tony Atlas is the best built wrestler I have ever seen.
All right, so yeah, Paul Bosch has just talked about each man's size. And to summarize the last, 50 seconds of your life, 49 seconds of your life, Tony Atlas is good because he's muscular. Atlas got out of a full Nelson with a butt to the stomach. Tug had Atlas bent over at one point and used a shoulder to the face. Bosch says that Atlas does not like getting hit in the face, which, thank you, Paul, for letting us know. So Atlas made his comeback. Atlas used a monkey flip, and Tug almost landed on Atlas's face. Atlas used a crotch hold and body press before winning with a headbutt and big splash. Gorgeous Gino Hernandez versus Tony Torres. What a coinky dink. Paul Bosch is here at this taping, as is Gorgeous Gino. It's almost like they're related in some way. Bosch puts Gino over as a tough wrestler and then says he's doing that in spite of not liking the poor guy. Poor Gino. The people of Houston apparently bothered Gino. Now, I've never been there, so I can't tell you whether or not they bothered me. People of Dallas bothered me. But people of Houston, I don't, never met them, so I couldn't tell you whether or not they bother me. So if Mr. Wrestling 2 earlier today used a headlock for an hour, Gino is working a knee lock for a good 30 minutes. Thankfully, Tony Torres realized he has a second foot and kicked Gino off. Gino almost won with a drop kick. He is no Jimmy Golden because Golden would have just won the match with the drop kick. However, he did win with what was referred to as a reverse chop on the chest. Now that you might be wondering what the hell a reverse chop to the chest is. It was a falling elbow drop from the middle rope. And then finally we get our expiration of time match. It is Chavo Guerrero and Mr. Olympia versus Rick and John Davidson. And we are getting closer and closer to the correct spelling of Chavo's name as they've dropped the U from his first name. So he's no longer Chavo Guerrero. He's Chavo Guerrero. But we're still missing that extra ER in his last name. And plus, Reeser thinks he's Hoovie's dad and calls him Guerrera again. Someone tell Reeser how to pronounce his name here. So Olympia, as we mentioned, has been doing Bupkiss since the Loser Leaves Town tag match. Mentioned that I forgot he was the Mississippi champion just because they stopped doing anything with it. Bosch calls Chavo, and I quote, young Chavo Guerrero. Chavo was 33 at the time, so I wouldn't call him old, but young might be a bit of a stretch. They announced that next week we're going to have Louisiana champion Jim Duggan versus Tony Atlas, along with Mr. Wrestling 2 teaming with Stagger Lee to go 2-on-2 with Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne. And that's next week. But this week, Olympia slingshots Chavo into the ring for the pin as the show comes to an end. And so that's it for Mid-South. It's another one of those episodes where, especially the first episode of a taping, a lot of times it's kind of dull. You have a lot of these matches where it's just stars getting wins. And there's not anything wrong with stars getting wins. It's just, it makes it for a difficult show to talk about, even though, I made it 37 minutes. Jesus Christ, that's a lot longer than I thought I would make it. But I also, that's Vince Out the Wrestling again, fine show, a lot of wrestling, nothing outstanding, nothing awful, except, at least nothing wrestling related that's awful. The booking, especially with the Stagger Lee thing, that's kind of bullshit, especially since Boyd couldn't even keep a straight face, and he's openly laughing at the idea that they're screwing over Ted DiBiase here. But yeah, so we'll see what happens next week. We got 2 main events next week, so that should be good. But before we move on and finish up the show, I want to talk about something here because a few weeks ago, Rey Mysterio on SmackDown got turned on by Santos Escobar. And one of those things that, everybody saw coming. It just, was a matter of when, not if. And somebody on the F4W site, I don't know because I didn't listen to the radio show, they mentioned that Rey Mysterio gets turned on a lot. And is he being turned on too much? And I think there is something to that. I do think that you get to a point where a babyface is being turned on too much, and you come across with 2 things here. That A, the babyface is gullible, and B, the babyface just really isn't likable. Because why is anybody who spends time around him turning on him and not want to be around him anymore? And I do think there is a threshold where, like, if somebody is too likable, they can't ever turn heel. And I think Rey Mysterio is kind of at that point for a number of reasons. That has nothing, it's not all about his size, because especially in 2023, wrestlers are smaller on the average than they were in 1982. You couldn't have had a 5'2" babyface turn serious heel in 1982, and you might be able to get away with it in 2023, 2024. But Rey Mysterio, yes, Rey Mysterio is a very likable person, a very likable wrestler. And I think about, like Ricky Steamboat told a story once that in 1990, 1991, when he was doing his failed run as the Dragon in WWF, he asked, everybody else is getting to turn heel and get a big money run with Hogan. Why can't he turn heel and get a money run with Hogan? And somebody, and I haven't heard the story in a while, so maybe been Pat Patterson, it may have been, anybody in the WWF at the time. They basically said that Ricky Steamboat is so likable that if they turned him heel and had him cut off Hulk Hogan's leg, the fans would probably sit here and go, you know what? Hogan deserved that. And I think it's possible that's where we are with Rey Mysterio. If Rey Mysterio, and at this point, I don't even know who you could really peg as a baby face that fans wouldn't turn on. Maybe let's go with LA Knight. Now there's more over baby faces than LA Knight, but let's just go with LA Knight. If Rey Mysterio turned heel and sawed off LA Knight's leg, would the fans go, you know what? LA Knight deserved that. He's a dick. And that's kind of where we're at. But can Rey just keep being turned on? Like Cody Rhodes, and I still say, like, there were a lot of things that got the fans to turn on Cody Rhodes in AEW. It wasn't just the Go-Go feud. It was Brandy not being likable. But also in like the first year and a half of the promotion, he got turned on by his quote-unquote best friend 3 different times. Shawn Spears, MJF, and QT Marshall. At some point, they were all Cody's best friend, and they all turned on him one after another. And like, I think subconsciously it makes you think, hey, this guy's pretty fucking unlikable, because everybody that likes him, turns their back on him. So are we going to reach that point with Rey where, even though we all know wrestling is a work, but there's still like that thing in the back of your head that goes, you know what? There might be something to this, that nobody likes this guy. So why the hell am I liking this guy? So just some food for thought to digest here for your Thanksgiving dinner. So with that, let's go to Weird News of the Week. And that, of course, is Weird News of the Week presented by Nobody. Nobody, the company that sponsors nothing. And we go to UPI.com, our good friend Ben Hooper, for this week's weird news: drought conditions blamed for pink pond in Hawaii. A pond in Hawaii is drawing attention due to its unusual pink color, and experts said it could be the result of recent drought conditions. Maui residents said they noticed in recent days that Kealia Pond, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but it's how we're pronouncing it today, that Kealia Pond has turned an unusual pink and purple hue. I just happened to drive by, and I was like, it's like Pepto-Bismol pink, Travis Morin told Hawaii News Now. Morin captured drone footage of the pond, which quickly went viral on Instagram. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services confirmed the water has been pink for nearly 2 weeks. Officials say the color change is believed to be the result of halobacteria found in waters with high salinity, and the pond's salt content has recently gone undiluted by rain as a result of recent drought conditions. The water is not believed to be toxic, but samples have been sent to the University of Hawaii for further testing. All right, so that is that. That's going to do it for this week's show. Hey, I said there wasn't much to talk about, and we've almost 45 minutes. So we're going to call this a win here, folks. And we're going to thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.